The Timberwolves season is not over yet. It was another thrilling game that came down to the wire, but unlike the other 3 games, Minnesota was able to close it out, keeping their season alive for a couple more days at least, and potentially maybe longer. This game was taking the exact path that the first 3 games were taking. Seemed like Minnesota had a lead, Dallas was cutting into the lead. Did Minnesota have an answer? Well, this time they did. And one of the biggest answers was Karl-Anthony Towns, who had 20 points in the second half, I believe. All of a sudden, he could not miss from 3. Like, it's just funny because he was obviously getting, criticized for how poorly he was shooting from the field, but from 3 specifically. And then he went and made like 4 threes in a row. His foul trouble is still such an issue. He really needs to not be in foul trouble because it's really hurting the team. And he unfortunately fouled out with like a minute and a half to go or something like that. They were able to hold on because before that, like I said, he hit like 4 threes in a row, which gave them at one point like a 5-point lead. It depended on, the second, because every time Minnesota had an answer, Dallas had an answer as well. Anthony Edwards was huge in this game as well. He played a very good game. He hit a bunch of big shots. I was so excited to see, there was one specific shot down the stretch where he called for a screen on Rudy Gobert. And unlike some of the other times, and this is something that I have been I haven't really said it in videos, but something that has, I guess, bothered me a bit about what Minnesota is doing is like, they'll set a screen for Anthony Edwards, like Rudy Gobert, for example, to get Derek Jones Jr. off of him and put, for example, in this play, Daniel Gafford on him. And while Daniel Gafford in general is a very good defender, very good rim protector, like I've spoken about him before, people are finally seeing his value because he is on Dallas in a winning situation. However, we talk about this all the time. A big man guarding someone on the perimeter, especially someone like Anthony Edwards who has a ton of moves in his bag, that's not exactly the best matchup for Daniel Gafford. And obviously Derek Jones Jr. is a better defender on Anthony Edwards. And I felt like throughout this series so far, they would come with the switch, but it wouldn't be like a hard switch, if that makes sense. Like, Derek Jones Jr. would just fight over the screen like super easily, and then Gobert would just go back to the paint or whatever. And that would drive me nuts because like for something that James Harden used to do, I know people didn't like how James Harden used to dribble the ball like crazy, like the whole shot clock. But what James Harden used to do is get the switch every time. Like he would make sure there was a screen, and if the screen didn't work, he'd get another screen. Like he would get the screens until he got the defender he wanted on him. And I feel like Anthony Edwards needs to do that a little more often, or rather Rudy Gobert needs to make sure he stays there until Anthony Edwards gets the defender he wants. But this was towards the end of the game. I forgot how much time was on the clock. This might have been after Cat fouled out, honestly. But Rudy Gobert comes to set a screen, and this time, even though Derek Jones Jr. like fought over the screen, Rudy Gobert stayed there the entire time until it was kind of Daniel Gafford on Anthony Edwards, but it was really nobody because of the screen. Derek Jones Jr. could not get over. So Anthony Edwards had a wide open jumper, which he knocked down. And like I said, I believe this was after Cat fouled out. And I feel like this essentially sealed the game for the Timberwolves. And I'm not trying to come at Rudy Gobert because there have been plenty of times where he sets a good screen. Like, I'm not saying he never does. I'm just saying I feel like they have not forced a switch enough. Like, you watch Luka, he gets the switch he wants every time. So I feel like Minnesota needs to make sure they get the switch for Anthony Edwards. Whatever it takes, set 2-3 screens if you have to. Just get Anthony Edwards the wide open shot so it just makes it easier on everybody. Because if you get the switch and Anthony Edwards is wide open, not only can he knock it down like he did, or now maybe he could pass it out to somebody else who's wide open because there's 2 players potentially at the top of the key. Let's just say they're at the top of the key. Rudy Gobert, his defender, and whoever was guarding Anthony Edwards. So someone maybe can cut to the basket and they'll be wide open. Like, I just feel like it opens up the options for Minnesota, but that's just, my opinion. Anyway, not to go on a whole tangent there, but it was just something I thought about that just has been bothering me. Sometimes I watch and I'm like, just get the screen. But anyway, Cat was big in this game. Anthony Edwards was good in this game. Rudy Gobert had some big plays down the stretch. Like I said, that big screen. And then I believe he had like 7 points in the second half, which doesn't seem like a lot. Obviously 7 points, compared to Luka, who scores like 40 every night. But Rudy Gobert ended up with, a decent amount of points for him. Like, his points were important. And another thing, I feel like they should play that Cat Rudy Gobert combo way more often. Do you see how effective it is? It wasn't even just in this game. I've seen them do it throughout the series. Like, when they do, I don't even know if you call it like pick and roll, because I really don't think it's pick and roll. But like, there was a play in this game, if you go back and watch the highlights, Cat was at the basket and he had like 2 defenders on him. Rudy Gobert cut to the basket and got a wide open dunk. Luka tried to contest it, but he couldn't, and then Gobert dunked it. Because of Cat's talent, he draws a lot of attention. And because of his ability, you know, like, he's a pretty mobile big man, like, he can drive to the basket and then pass it to Rudy Gobert right under the basket. Like, they've done this a few times. Like, I don't know exactly what the play is that they're running, but whenever they run that play, it works almost every time. So I feel like they should run that way more often, because even if, let's just say, Rudy Gobert doesn't get a dunk, they will most likely foul Gobert because of, you know, he's not the best free throw shooter. And at least you get an opportunity to get points on the board, because Gobert has made 2 in a row at times. But also you can get someone in foul trouble, because they'd rather foul Gobert than give him a wide open dunk. But eventually those fouls add up. So somehow this video ended up being like tips that I think that the Minnesota Timberwolves should do in order to win Game 5, when that really wasn't what I was trying to do in this video. That wasn't my direction in this video, but it ends up going that way. So maybe that's what I'll title it. Something like Keys to Game 5 for Minnesota. Overall, everybody played solid, but the biggest difference was really Karl-Anthony Towns and Anthony Edwards, but especially Cat, playing well. They even talked about how the difference in the series has been the 2 stars. And today, the 2 stars on Minnesota, Karl-Anthony Towns and Anthony Edwards, outscored Luka and Kyrie. And that's just been the difference in the series. So I guess another key to Game 5, if they want to win, is have Karl-Anthony Towns and Anthony Edwards outscore Luka and Kyrie, or at least match them. Like, they need to be efficient. Like, they have to be efficient. And because Minnesota is going home, this could be beneficial to them, because as they always say, role players play better at home. And for some players that's true, some players it's not. But maybe, like, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, for example, has really struggled with his shot lately. Maybe if Anthony Edwards and Karl-Anthony Towns are efficient, and now Nickeil Alexander-Walker finds his shot, you're talking about a different ball game, and then Naz Reid does his thing. The other thing, and the last thing I'll say, which is obvious, and I kind of alluded to it at the beginning of the video, is that the Timberwolves need to stop fouling so much. Like, they are making so many silly fouls that are just costing them points. Like, when they should have a lead that's like 10 plus, 15 plus, the lead will be like 5, because they'll be making these silly fouls that make no sense. And again, that has to do with experience, you know, time and place. The Mavs, Luka and Kyrie, I always just allude to them just because they are the 2 stars of the team, but, you know, other players have experience. But in terms of shot making, like, Luka and Kyrie know exactly how to draw a foul at the specific time. So I know some of that has to do with experience. It's not all their fault per se, but Minnesota has to stop fouling, because you're not going to always be able to, you know, bail yourselves out of that kind of thing.